partnership. Brad contacted me a while ago through a mutual friend of ours. He was trying to organise creative coding meetups, and I'm sure he'll have a lot to say about that. But so we thought it'd be great to get him out here to talk in more detail about what he's doing and what his aims and aspirations are. So thank you, Brad, for coming, and I'll hand it over to you.
Cool, no worries. Okay, cool. Hi guys. My name's Brad. Like I'm assuming most of you, I'm a creative technologist, tech nerd, art tech nerd, whatever you want to call yourselves. And I work with a group called Media Lab Melbourne. And so Media Lab Melbourne, we run a bunch of different events. I'll do Media Lab Melbourne first. So we run a bunch of different events focusing on the intersection between art and technology. Pierre, a mate of mine, founded it probably about 6 or 7 years ago now. It's just a bit of a loose collective of people, and we put on events. Mostly our regular events are the Creative Coding Meetup, which I'll talk to you guys a bit more in depth today about, and Open Lab, which I'll talk to you about as well. We also run other events just like exhibitions, sprints, hacks. We do installations and run workshops, all around the idea of the intersection between arts and technology. And we also have a strong aim at the moment now to try and encourage gender balance. Obviously, you guys are all guys. This field is dominated by...
We do have some girls, I should say.
Yeah, no, I checked the website, that's cool. It's just, it's something that's kind of come to a forefront, looking to kind of try and make the gender balance a little bit more even, and get more ideas flowing around and more variety in projects. Bit about my. Yep. I go back. Oh, there we go. Bit about myself. I'm a creative technologist. I worked in computer games for 7 years as an artist mainly. Then I learnt to code because it looked like everyone else was having heaps of fun coding, and I'm colourblind, so I was never going to get to be lead artist. So I taught myself to code, and I've never looked back. I spend probably most waking hours in front of the computer with my head buried in. Mostly I use Unity and C#, sometimes Unreal, C++, processing, all the kind of stuff you guys are all likely familiar with. Max MSP from time to time. I'm primarily a self-directed learner, which for me, the reason I get involved with Media Lab Melbourne and starting the creative coding meetups and stuff is because I know there are a lot of people that uni doesn't necessarily work out for, quite possibly. But some people, myself, I have a creative motivation and a goal and a project that's easily, packed into a couple of months. That's something that I can easily focus on, get done, and learn the skills that I need to do that. So I left games and pursued a career in, I suppose, as a creative technologist, making art, public space artworks, installation, motion-driven musical performance, and the group Ethno did the opening of Poland. I recently did a fellowship with the City of Melbourne, and I wrote a report on fostering creative technologists and maker communities. Now, this is kind of where my starting of the creative coding thing stemmed from. I spent a couple of months traveling around Europe and the States visiting creative tech, advertised that they were teaching, because you face it, you guys teach people, say a Raspberry Pi work, all kind of creatively motivated. So teaching people sometimes in a STEM skill, tech engineering and maths, has a massive focus on at the moment, because we lack those skills in Australia, or the people leave to go to Cisco. Coding meetup as a bit. Plus, a lot of my friends make cool stuff with code, and it's kind of a bummer seeing all these people making all this awesome stuff, but all you really see of it is a YouTube video they'll post occasionally or something for a gig. And these are people, you know, that often works by themselves or whatever, but they do have aspirations for larger projects, but they don't necessarily always know. Yeah, so it's a casual monthly meetup. It's run out on here. New Kathleen Syme Library next. Draw on the white t-shirts and these and thread and coding the different pathways through the digestive system. Animate it all. So they learn a little bit of tech, got to do a little bit of art, creatively motivated pictures, mashed them together and did some processing on them and uploaded them to Twitter, and she's got like she's done it as a fine arts thing and has a whole conceptual side of it, but at the creative coding meetups we generally try and take an approach where we're looking more at the process, inspiration and how people went about learning and implementing their ideas, more so than heavy on the conceptual art side of things. So trying to focus more on process. Yeah. Learning outcome. So we have 2 talkers per month. We have themed monthly challenges this week. So like procedural. For example, I made just a simple motion simulation in Unity and kind of tried to make it look a little bit arty. The Connect and music, and I was doing cool stuff with the Connect and visuals, like let's do something together. And then we did. Yeah, so good place to meet people. Other events that Media Lab Melbourne are running. So we also run Open Lab. This is a bi-monthly at Acme X now. Acme X has just opened up near Acme in Federation Square. And so this is a bit more of a formalized event where we have usually 2 speakers that are usually established practitioners in their field. Also looking at the intersection between art and technology. Not always necessarily code focused, this one, but very interesting and very kind of on the periphery of everything that everyone here is doing anyway, if it's not directly relevant. This one's actually going to be really good. We've got Megan Beckwith, who's talking about her live performance and multimedia work, often done in virtual reality, but also Andrew Sorensen, who has created his own live coding audio framework called Extempore. It is really, really awesome. So he's coming down and he'll be doing a talk as well. So if you're into live coding stuff, he actually does really interesting live coding music. It doesn't just sound like the usual synthesizer, bleep, blop, bit crush noise stuff. He actually does some really interesting stuff with vocal sampling and layering, kind of vocal harmonies and more kind of orchestral sounding, I think, from what I've heard of it anyway. Yeah, how can you find us? We're on meetups.com, Facebook, Media Lab Melbourne, but if you want to just grab all those slides, just take a photo of that, because that's the link to everything that's on here. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Nope. Cool. Done. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you visited a lot of labs overseas and
Yes.
things, and you were looking at the issue of gender balance.
Yes.
So what experience can you tell us about that encourages more active participation?
Oh, okay. Yeah. This is like a strong focus of my report. Look, The events that I went to that did have stronger female participation, I went to Wear It Festival in Berlin, and that was a wearable technology festival. And obviously there's a crossover there with fashion, fashion design, all that kind of stuff. But I went there, and I there was probably about 70% women to 30% males, and that was really interesting for me to see. And I went around and I made a point of going to meet a bunch of people, and I thought a lot of them would be people from the fashion industry coming in, to learn about, wearable technology. But that wasn't the case. It was actually, a lot of the women there were actually female developers. It's just that I think and I don't want to stereotype or generalize too much, but, I was in games for 7 years. There's definitely a whole lot of bro culture kind of, not exactly the nicest place for chicks to be in all the time. So I think that's something that, I've become conscious of over the years as well. But that being said, like, I've run VR workshops at Acme in Melbourne before, and we had one more girl and we had guys, and it was a 15 group, so that was pretty good. The games courses in Melbourne, I think, are doing pretty well for female participation as well, just because games are becoming more, I suppose, mainstream now, and more acceptable as almost a career path. Yeah. Mind you, don't get into games, it's quite a boring job a lot of the time, unless you're in a small studio. Yeah.
Brad, can you just tell us a little bit more about, where you transferred from being a game artist to a coder? Was it working in games and starting to code some of the 3D models, and was it Unity or was it other things?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just interested in the steps that,
Look, so like I've always, I get bored if I stop learning things. So like I'm always mucking around with learning new things. So like I'd played with processing a little bit before. Obviously, it's a lot of people's entry point into creative coding. John's course is great for that. And so, I started playing around with processing, and I was really interested in kind of taking the models and stuff that I was doing in 3D. I was doing stuff in 3D Max and ZBrush and whatever, and kind of transferring the assets I was already making and giving them the behaviors that I could see the programmers being able to do. So I just started playing around with trying to make them doing visuals, because I was going to a lot of gigs and stuff then, so I wanted to make real-time visuals for music. So I started playing around with different audio libraries in processing, getting things to move. Then started playing with XNA, which is the Microsoft game framework back in the day. I don't think it's around, or it's dead or dying now. Monogame? Okay.
Took it and made it open source.
Okay, yeah.
Tried to save it.
Yeah. Then I jumped over to Unity because I was using it for work, but it's just really simple and easy to get into. I do like the kind of component-based approach to creating objects as well. But mainly what I did, I was just, I was seeing programmers hang around after work, have beer with them. They'd be like, okay, well, can you show me how to do some stuff? And I'll show you how to do some, do a bit of a skill swap, show them how to do some modeling, some texturing stuff, which was really good. And then just kind of getting enough of a skill set from that to understand the vocabulary and syntax enough to at least know how to then go home and look up a YouTube video on, what are lists? How do I construct a list? What is a dictionary? That kind of stuff. And then I found Daniel Schiffman's Nature of Code and loved it. So I just kind of chewed through all the way through that. So that's kind of how I got into coding. Haven't looked back really. I do still do a heap of art, like 3D art as well. So
So do you consider yourself more a coder or an artist?
I don't even really consider myself an artist. I don't know, like it's a weird one. I make things that I think are interesting and fun all the time and aesthetically pleasing. Sometimes they border on what I might call art, in terms of having a higher concept or something that is engaging on a different level. But now, it's like my parents asked me, when somebody asks me what my job is, my job covers a whole lot of different stuff. At the moment, I'm doing a whole lot of virtual reality things for car shows. Some of it's commercial, some documentaries, virtual reality documentaries, VR fairy tales. So it's kind of goes across a whole bunch of different stuff. Installation work. We recently did an installation work with a studio partnered with Latrobe and the NGV. We're using a brainwave reader, showing people 4 different artworks, 2 by Andy Warhol, 2 by Ai Weiwei, and measuring their engagement and then building up a generative image out of how they engage with those artworks. So I still get to play with a lot of really interesting stuff and do things that are, I suppose, intended as art, but I wouldn't really necessarily call myself an artist all the time. Yeah. But it's you know,
Yeah, no,
semantics.
I think it's very interesting. So this is a really hard question to answer, but if you were born, say, 50 to 100 years ago, what do you think you would have done?
50 to 100 years ago, I would
If
have been.
there was
I
no
would have been a
internet,
scientist.
There was no internet, no technology.
No, I'd have been a scientist for sure.
Yeah.
I still kind of wish I did neuro, but no. Look, yeah, uni wasn't for me. When I gave it a go, I did computer science for about a year and a little bit. Yeah, it just wasn't. I don't know.
But what's interesting though is that, like you say, that you're a sort of self-directed learner, so you've
Yes.
basically learned a whole lot of stuff just because you had to, because you saw the usefulness.
Yeah, because I wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is quite different than why a lot of people come to university, because they come for a career or to, you know, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, well, look, when I left games to try and be a creative technologist, it wasn't really a career.
Yeah.
Like I had picked up a few gigs doing bits and pieces that I liked doing, but it worked out. Like we managed to get enough work to there's a couple of months there where it was, eat 2-minute noodles for dinner, but now it's, everyone wants creative technologists because you can do a whole bunch of different stuff. And I'm a big believer in, obviously because I don't have that piece of paper, I'm a big believer in looking at people's folios and their experiences and how they approach learning things themselves. Because especially in games as well, like I've seen a lot of people come into games that, because I was responsible for hiring people at one point, and they wouldn't have had any formal education, but they have an amazing portfolio. And I'd definitely hire that guy over somebody who's just finished, a course somewhere and has barely made anything outside of their coursework.
So where do you think the motivation comes from for you?
Infinite curiosity. Just curious.
But
what
you're
would this
curious
look like
about-
if I changed this value? What if I changed that value? Oh, that's really interesting. I think I especially gel with the kind of like the biomimetic stuff that that Daniel Schiffman talks about in The Nature of Code, but it was Craig Reynolds Boyd's things and the flocking simulations and L systems and growth simulations and that kind of stuff. In terms of generative artworks, that's kind of what inspires me, because you can see real life being replicated inside of something that is digital and something that is inherently artificial. That's quite interesting. But I also just enjoy creating things that aren't possible as well in the real world at the moment. VR is kind of really interesting for me because you've got all this space to play with. There's new mechanics, input mechanics and interaction mechanics that people haven't yet fully defined or figured out how best to use them. Interaction with digital systems is also something that I'm really interested in, so different interfaces. So as soon as the Kinect came out, I was all over that, or the PrimeSense camera, that kind of stuff. Done a whole bunch of stuff with controlling music and visuals using the Leap Motion, and accelerometers and conductive fabrics on gloves and stuff like that. So interacting with digital systems is also something that I find really interesting, because I see it somewhere that as humans we will have to move, and we will eventually move, trying to figure out interesting ways to do that and push that forward, I suppose, is kind of fun.
I had a question. Where do you see Melbourne and or Australia positioned in this space relative to Europe, where you're saying you're exhibiting and stuff like that, or the US?
Yeah. In the creative coding space in particular?
Yeah.
Or Look, we have a lot of people here doing really interesting stuff. Again, and that's why I wanted to get the meetup together, is to get everyone together. So it's kind of easy when you're at home just coding stuff up, posting things up, and if you're not a part of a community or a group locally that are sharing, then it's easy to think that there's not many other people around doing that kind of stuff, but there actually is. So it's kind of, the internet is fantastic for that, because you can reach out and find a community halfway across the world. Half the stuff I learnt is from people who, answering my questions on forums or, IRC chats halfway across the world that are really good at doing whatever they're doing. But then with the internet, because you're connecting with all these vast, sparse, spread out communities, you kind of forget sometimes that there actually are local communities of people doing really interesting stuff. I think the advent of meetups.com has really changed a lot of that. Everywhere that I went, like when I was doing my research, and I'd usually do my research, find a couple of things to go to, a couple of established labs or different, exhibitions or events to go to. But then I'd ask people about what's going on locally, and they would say, just jump on meetups, everything's on there. And so, Berlin in particular, there's so much going on. Like there's meetups for data viz groups, there's meetups for VR, there's meetups for wearables, and heaps of them as well. And lots of people going to them. So look, before I left, I hadn't actually gotten into meetups a whole lot, because there wasn't a lot that I had seen going on in Melbourne, which I was obviously blind to because I came back, and it's full of really cool stuff. Like there's meetups for health tech, there's meetups for creative coding now. But there's meetups for VR and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, look, I think Australia has a lot of really interesting people doing stuff with creative code.
What about the ability to get it into like public spaces and things like that?
That's something I'm kind of, I have a bit of a bugbear about. So, look, Australia's traditional arts boards have taken a long time to kind of catch up to the fact that just because you're using a computer, it's not just a gimmick. And I understand why they're often like that, because a lot of the first things that do come out are kind of gimmicky, right? So you're starting to see now, Australian Council of the Arts starting to fund more experimental stuff that involves technology as well. But, I've exhibited works at Fed Square a bunch of times. They try and get more stuff that is, technologically, I suppose, focused as well now, with their new director in there. But for things like, my main gripe is White Night, for example, right? You walk around, there's projection maps, buildings everywhere. A lot of time you sit there, you watch your 5-minute loop, you go to the next one, you're done, you've seen it, right? I really like interactive works, stuff where you can get people involved with the artwork as well, but also interacting with each other while they're interacting with the artwork as well. So, because it creates a talking point, it gets people, to interact with one another, not even usually just within their group, like they'll interact with the people around them as well. So White Night's been pretty kind of boring, really, in terms of the amount of interactive work or stuff that isn't using just solely projection and pre-rendered video. If anyone knows a group called NS, they do some cool stuff with generative works. They've done some really interesting stuff at White Night as well. But yeah, I'd be really keen to see more generative works done for White Night. I've got a pretty good relationship with Fed Square, so I'm pushing them and a couple of the festivals like Pause Fest and Melbourne Knowledge Week. So I'm really pushing them to try and integrate more creative coding and stuff into them. Because actually I'm curating the opening talks for Melbourne Knowledge Week. So for that, I got from Deacon Stephanie Andrews. She's done a work with John McCormick. John McCormick. I always get you guys confused. Yeah. And that uses Connect and virtual reality and neural network trained body trying to follow and mimic a human's movement called Duet. Some guys from Vic Uni who are scientists, artists, engineers, and they're called Skunk Control, and they make some amazingly beautiful artworks using microcontrollers, polarized lenses and special materials. and Andrew Sorensen as well. So you've got him coming down to he's going to do a live coding performance. So yeah, we've got plenty of people doing cool stuff. It's just getting it into that kind of art into the mainstream. And one reason that I do think it's really important to get that stuff into the mainstream more is because I find it more accessible as well for a lot of people. Because if you have something that is interactive, something that works on more than just a, hey, it's art, it's over here, it's in a gallery, you're not allowed to touch it kind of thing. This is probably more an argument for public workspaces as well though. As soon as you bring things out of a stuffy gallery space, you kind of invite a different audience as well. But if you're also providing artworks that aren't just about necessarily the art, there is interesting engineering in it, there is interesting technology in it, there is interesting science behind it. It gives people from more of a broad background an interest, at least a way into it. Yeah.
I think maybe too there's an interesting relationship that you have, like outside of the traditional art establishment. So, like you mentioned that you do a lot of stuff for companies and things who want.
Yep. Sad history of not doing anything until it's been done in America or Europe, really. And a lot of the time, actually really has been the commercial industry driving a lot of the uptake of creative technology in the arts as well, sadly, because there's been a couple of things being done over in the States, whatever, or Europe, that have shown that it works on a commercial marketing level, and then people like the arts organisations are going, oh, this could actually be taken as legitimate art, because you get Red Bull or V try to do something that is kind of, it's interesting because it's cool and arty and exciting, but it's not necessarily just going giant V logo or giant Red Bull logo. They're trying to make something that's cool and then stick their little bit at the end. And a lot of those things I find that a lot of them actually are quite creative.
So do you think? A good example is there's that German group Art Plus Com. Do you know that?
No.
So they've been around for a long time, and they sit at that interface between fine art and commercial art. So they have a lot of really big clients. So one of their biggest clients is BMW. But the work that they produce for them is really, it's not traditional advertising or anything like that. It's artworks for BMW. So the one that they're most famous for is it's at the big BMW place in wherever they're made. Munich, in Munich. And it's basically this whole set of these silver balls that move up and down, and they create all the shapes of different cars and things.
Yeah, that was really cool. I love that piece.
Yeah, so the guys who founded that, they've been around for a long time, and they actually came up with something that predates Google Maps and Google Earth by a long way. And they had an interactive kind of virtual reality. This is in the late 1980s, early 1990s. Oh. And for years they had a legal battle with Google about who came up with it. And eventually, and of course Google have got a lot of lawyer power. And they didn't have as much, but eventually recently, I think last year, they won the case. And it was recognised that they actually came up with what's now Google Maps and Google Earth. So I don't know where this is really going, but the point of it is that I think the reason why they were so successful was firstly because they had great ideas, but also because there were companies who were willing to take them on, not just to make advertising for them, that they recognised the value. I mean, there is a long history of this. So like IBM, they employed people like Charles and Ray Eames, who are really famous in the design world. And they basically just had them as advisors. They didn't want them to make ads for them. They made fantastic films like Powers of 10, and they did big kind of shows that were encouraging kids to get interested in technology and art and so on. So it's not like this is very new. It's just that the corporate relationship has shifted a little bit. And getting back to, rather than turning this into my talk, getting back to the question is really about if companies based in Australia have that mindset. And I don't think they do today.
No, not at all.
Like IBM was, for all its, IBM has a lot of problems, but back in the 60s and 70s, they were a really innovative company in terms of sponsoring artists, employing designers, and not just to be mouthpieces for what they were doing, but to actually collectively explore the possibilities for technology.
Yeah, look, I think Ars Electronica actually is a brilliant example of that. Because they have actually some of your artworks are up at Ars Electronica as well, which I got to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was there earlier this year. I got to go to Ars Electronica, the festival, and then visited the museum and then their future lab. So they've got the museum, which is kind of like, it's got a little bio lab, little 3D printing, laser cutting lab, maker lab kind of thing. All these kinds of different little interactive displays and cool stuff that people can go in and do in their museum. So that's like a public, everyone can go to thing. Then they've got their festival, but then they've got their future lab. And so their future lab is just full of different creative technologists working with corporate clients to create interesting artworks. They do kind of, well, one of them they made these, I think they called them Spraxels. It's the drones with lights that fly around in formation. I think they worked with Intel recently on one of those. They worked with Mercedes on helping design stuff for their new autonomous car, but more so on the kind of looks and usability and looking at it from a user's perspective on aesthetic and how they wanted to interact with it as well, doing the interaction design for it, which is a great use of a company like that, I think. But yeah, as for Australia, our corporate culture is pretty boring. Again, just won't do things unless a lot of other companies do. A lot of other countries do. Hopefully that will change though, but I don't necessarily see it happening anytime soon. Sorry to put it down. Yeah. But it might though. Like all this talk of innovation, disruptive startup knowledge economy, whatever. Malcolm doesn't even know what he's talking about when he says those words, because he does the exact opposite the week after. But yeah, look, if companies truly take that stuff on board and truly looking at being agile and disruptive and innovative, it's obviously going to require interesting uses of new technologies and bringing people on board that have the ability to investigate and look at those kind of innovative and experimental uses of new technologies and how they might help a business be able to disrupt or generate knowledge for the economy and that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Cool. Any more questions?
Any more questions? No? All right. Well, let's thank Brad for a great presentation. Hopefully, you'll see a few of us at the next.
Yeah, come on.
Meetup.
Yeah, sweet. Bring any cool projects you